Hey guys, tonight we're diving into a story that doesn't try too hard to impress you. It's not about epic battles or grand kingdoms rising and falling. No, tonight is about something much slower, much quieter, and significantly smellier. You're about to step into a village so deeply committed to not solving its problems, it should honestly win an award. A place where one animal, just one, has disrupted local life for decades, and no one can agree on what to do about it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is over there. I'm always curious. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk along a dirt path that crunches softly beneath your feet, the air thick with the scent of damp moss and faint wood smoke. It's the kind of smell that makes you feel like you've already been here for a while, even if you haven't. Up ahead, nestled between gnarled old trees, is a village so small it could fit inside a moderately sized picnic. Roofs sag under layers of moss, windows are barely bigger than your hand, and every building looks like it's been shrugging since the 1600s. Nothing in this place moves quickly. Not the vegetables in the gardens, not the people, not even time itself, really. The village is called Trondle, and it's known for exactly one thing, a wild boar that no one wants to hunt. Not out of fear would require energy, but more out of tradition. You see, in Trondle, ignoring a problem long enough is considered a form of wisdom. The boar isn't a threat, it's an institution. It showed up over 50 years ago and never left. It knocks over milk buckets, digs up gardens, and sometimes naps right in the middle of the only bridge in town. The boar has disrupted harvests, ruined festivals, and once allegedly chewed through a priest's sermon notes. And still, no one does anything. You pass through the town square, which is more like a patch of slightly flatter grass, surrounded by benches so crooked they look like they gave up halfway through being furniture. 5 old men sit there, napping in eerie unison. As you walk by, one of them cracks open an eye and rasps, "You're here for the boar, aren't you?" before dozing off again without waiting for an answer. The truth is, this boar has become legend, not the epic, fire-breathing, night-slaying kind, more like a local myth built on mild inconvenience and collective stubbornness. One villager swears it once ate his entire cabbage patch and then stared at him like he was the problem. Another insists the boar understands sarcasm. A third claims it speaks Latin, but only when it's raining.
Historians still argue over whether Trondle was ever a functioning community or just a long-standing experiment in passive resistance. One 12th century monk once wrote, "Trondle moves like a shadow on a cloudy day. It seems to go somewhere, but never does." Which is a polite way of saying this village operates at the speed of molasses in midwinter. Not long after you arrive, a woman stops you. She's carrying a basket full of what might be elderberries, or possibly just decorative rocks, and a cat is curled up on top, fast asleep. "You're not a hunter, are you?" she asks, not sounding particularly worried either way. You tell her no, and she smiles like that's exactly the answer she hoped for. "Good," she says. "Hunters only cause meetings." You hear that a lot. Meetings. Not action, not plans, just endless, sleepy arguments in stuffy rooms about whether the boar should be considered a menace or a misunderstood neighbor. One villager suggests inviting it to the next harvest festival. He's part of the town now, he explains, just needs a bath and maybe a therapist. The local tavern is called the Barrel Tipped Sideways, and the soup they serve looks like something your immune system would file a complaint about. Still, you sit, sip, and listen. It's not long before you hear two men debating whether the boar's presence actually improves crop yield through emotional intimidation. You're not even sure what that means, but no one seems to question it. And here's the thing, you start to get it. You start to feel what they feel. This boar, ridiculous as it sounds, is part of something bigger. It's not about solving the problem. It's about having a problem that everyone knows, everyone shares, and no one has to do anything about. The boar is the town's rhythm, its chaos, its identity. You begin to wonder what would happen if someone did try to hunt it. Would the town collapse into actual productivity? Would people start walking faster, answering questions directly, installing window panes larger than a cookie? It's a chilling thought. So for now, you lean back, finish your soup, and let the idea of the boar live on unchallenged in your mind. You haven't seen it yet, but you already understand it. And in a strange way, that makes you feel right at home.
The first time you actually see the boar, it's not during a dramatic chase or while it's stealing a basket of apples like some petty forest criminal. No, it's just standing there, right in the middle of the road, like it owns the place. Which, let's be honest, it kind of does. The animal is massive, easily the size of a recliner, and covered in a thick coat of bristled fur that somehow manages to look both filthy and majestic. Its tusks curve upward like old roots that forgot which way gravity works, and its eyes, they give you the same look your grandmother gave you when you tried to microwave tinfoil. Not angry, just deeply disappointed. You stop. It stops. The air between you is heavy with unspoken rules. You think, maybe if you back away slowly, it'll return to doing whatever boars do when no one's looking. But then it snorts loudly. A cloud of mist bursts from its nose like it's trying to establish dominance through theatrical fog. And just like that, the boar walks off into someone's garden and begins demolishing a row of vegetables like it's performing a one-boar cooking show. How to turn parsnips into craters. You don't intervene. No one does. A man watering his plants just a few feet away barely looks up. "That's just Gregory," he mutters, as if that explains everything. Apparently, the villagers have given the boar a name. Multiple names, actually. Gregory, Lord Tusk, Captain Rootsnout, Susan. The name seems to depend entirely on who's telling the story and how much sleep they got the night before. You later learn that the boar's presence has inspired everything from folk songs to interpretive dances, most of which end with a dramatic flop to the ground and a sigh. Children draw it on their walls. Teens dare each other to follow it into the woods. Elders claim it was sent by the forest spirits as some kind of divine test. One man insists it's the reincarnation of his ex-wife, which says more about his marriage than the boar. The town council, If you can call a group of people who meet once a month to disagree on the placement of a bench, a council has tried to vote on what to do about the boar exactly 42 times. Each time ends the same way, with a lengthy discussion about whether it's ethical to interfere with nature, followed by tea, biscuits, and absolutely no resolution. Still, every now and then, a brave soul arrives from another village, eager to make a name for themselves by confronting the infamous beast. And every time, they leave. Not injured, just confused, disarmed, spiritually defeated. One hunter, after spending 3 days tracking the boar, ended up writing poetry about existential dread and now lives in a yurt somewhere near the cliffs.
Curiously, in the 18th century, there was a similar village in France, Chambon-sur-Loire, famous for refusing to remove a particularly aggressive goose from its central square. It terrorized bakers, bit politicians, and once stole the town bell. But the villagers declared it a symbol of independent governance and even put it on their coat of arms. Historians still debate whether this was an act of civic pride or just a shared psychotic break brought on by poor wine storage. Back in Trondheim, you're starting to notice the town's strange ecosystem has a rhythm. Every time the boar wrecks something, a fence, a cart, a child's sandcastle, it sparks just enough outrage to call a meeting, but not enough for action. People whisper about it like it's the weather, annoying but ultimately untouchable. Later that week, you're invited to your first official boar meeting. It takes place in the old chapel, which smells like dust and forgotten decisions. People shuffle in slowly, settling into creaky chairs that groan under even the lightest weight. A bell rings, though no one seems sure why, and the discussion begins. It is, in a word, exhausting. One villager suggests laying a salt trail to lure the boar into the woods. Another proposes building a wooden statue of a larger, more intimidating boar to assert dominance. Someone else wants to knit it a cozy, assuming it might stop being destructive if it felt loved. You sit through it all, quietly fascinated by how nobody actually wants to get rid of the problem. They just want new ways to talk about it. And it makes you wonder, how many things in life are like that? Problems we don't really solve, just decorate, talk around, assign names and emotions to. Maybe Gregory isn't a monster. Maybe he's just a mirror, rooting up the parts of life we'd rather leave buried. There's even a town legend claiming the boar arrived the day the mayor died in his sleep, and some believe the two events are cosmically linked. When Gregory finally leaves, one elder whispers, we'll all have to wake up. You don't ask what that means. You're not sure you want to know. As the meeting ends, someone hands you a cup of herbal tea and a scone with suspiciously boar-shaped frosting. You chew slowly, staring out the chapel window at the garden Gregory recently pulverized. The sky is a soft pink now, like the town itself is blushing over its own ridiculousness. And you're starting to feel like you belong. You don't actually remember signing up for the task force, but here you are, standing in a muddy field with 3 other villagers and a crate labeled "Do Not Agitate." The air smells like damp moss and overly confident decision-making. One of your companions is a man named Elric who carries a lasso and speaks exclusively in nautical metaphors, despite living 100 miles from the nearest body of water. "We're not hunting a boar," he says, squinting toward the forest line. "We are navigating a storm with tusks." The goal today? Observation. Just a little passive boar watching. No confrontation, no sudden movements, just standing very still while a 300-pound forest tank lives its best chaotic life in your periphery. Easy. Gregory, true to form, arrives late and uninvited. He bursts through the underbrush like he's late for a meeting with destruction. This time, he's trailing something long and suspiciously glittery behind him. Someone's tinsel-covered clothesline now wrapped around his hind leg like a festive war trophy. You're not even mad. You're kind of impressed. You jot a few notes in the Boar behavior log, a notebook that appears to have once been used to record weather patterns but is now repurposed for tracking chaos. 9:17 a.m. Gregory defiles begonias. 9:21 a.m. stares into Elric's soul. 9:24 a.m. appears to eat a pine cone out of spite. As you observe, you begin to notice something strange, not about the boar, but about the town. No one seems to want this to end. There's a bizarre comfort in the ritual of reacting to Gregory. He knocks over flower pots. People get together to fix them. He raids the bakery. The baker bakes more. Every act of destruction is followed by connection, community, and passive-aggressive baking competitions. This curious cycle is reminiscent of the Roman concept of ludi, public games and spectacles that were often used to keep the masses entertained and distracted from bigger problems. Bread and circuses, as they say. Or, in Trondle's case, boars and biscuits. You wonder if Gregory is serving a similar purpose, offering chaos just predictable enough to keep people busy while nothing else ever really changes. At one point, Elric tries to lure Gregory with a bucket of fermented pears. Gregory responds by staring directly at him, then delicately tipping the bucket over with his snout. It's not an attack, it's a message, one that clearly says, "Nice try, sea captain."
Suddenly, one of the villagers you hadn't noticed before, a wiry woman with a thick accent and sharper cheekbones than should be lethal, steps forward and starts singing. Singing, an old folk tune in a language you don't recognize. Gregory freezes. You all freeze. It's like someone pressed pause on a woodland opera. Then, the boar slowly, deliberately, turns and walks away. "Did you see that?" someone whispers. You did. And now everyone is staring at the woman who just shrugs and says, "My grandmother sang that to keep bears away." "Gregory's not a bear," Elric mutters. "No," she replies, "but he listens like one." For the rest of the day, she's treated like royalty. People start calling her the Boar Whisperer, and a few even offer to pay her in pickles and hand-knit scarves to join the council. She declines both offers, instead walking off with a fresh baguette and the quiet satisfaction of someone who knows she could, if she wanted, end the chaos. Historians still argue over whether music was ever used in medieval Europe to calm animals. Some texts mention it, others dismiss it as folklore. One particularly dramatic debate from 1892 nearly ended in a duel over the role of bagpipes in calming angry goats. The academic world is nothing if not deeply, deeply weird. That night, as you lie in bed, you think about how no one's really trying to change anything. The council meets, the hunters come and go, and Gregory continues his reign of minor inconveniences. But maybe that's the point. In a world spinning with real disasters, the town has chosen to hold on to its weird little problem. A problem that doesn't kill, doesn't truly hurt, just unsettles, just enough to keep people talking. Your thoughts drift, then anchor on something else entirely. A rumor you heard during the council meeting, a whisper about the argument. Not the usual kind over whose goat ate whose socks, but the argument, the one that tore the town in half years ago. Supposedly, it started with a hunting party, a failed expedition, a disagreement, and then silence. They say the boar showed up not long after. Now, lying beneath your blanket, listening to the soft wind against your shutters, you wonder if Gregory is less of a problem and more of a consequence. A memory with tusks. The next morning, you wake up to a sound that's become weirdly comforting. The distant clatter of something wooden being annihilated. Gregory has made his entrance again. You stretch, yawn, and contemplate whether it's worth getting dressed or if you'll be encountering him in your pajamas like yesterday. The answer, as always, is yes, because Gregory has zero respect for personal boundaries or flannel. You step outside and find him casually headbutting a wheelbarrow into splinters in Old Man Harlan's yard. Harlan, bless his soul, is just watching with a mug of tea like he's front row at a one-hog demolition derby. "Morning," he calls cheerfully, raising his cup. He's trying new techniques. You wave, more out of habit than enthusiasm. There's something disturbingly hypnotic about Gregory's determination. The way he squares up to inanimate objects as though they've personally offended him. He locks eyes with a rain garrow, and you can almost hear his internal monologue. "You think you're better than me?" What gets you, though, is how everyone's just adjusted. No panic, no rushing about. Someone even made a sign near the bakery that says, "Watch for Boar, free muffin if you trip," which is frankly brilliant marketing. Later that afternoon, you find yourself in a small gathering behind the town hall. It's an unofficial, off-the-record kind of meeting. Chairs are arranged in a circle, which either means deep discussion or a really low-budget seance. Turns out it's the former. People want to talk. Not about Gregory, exactly, but about what's around Gregory, what he represents, what's been festering under the surface. Someone brings up the hunting expedition that went wrong, the one that happened years ago, the one no one likes to discuss in public. Apparently, it started with a dispute over territory, or perhaps pride. Historians still debate whether such divisions in small rural communities were fueled more by economic strain or the slow erosion of shared values. You're not a historian, but you've definitely seen someone hoard turnips out of spite. According to local lore, half whispers and unfinished sentences, the group set out with grand ambitions to cull a dangerous beast and restore honor to the village. But they returned days later, silent, wounded, and minus one man. No explanations, no report. Just a look in their eyes like they'd stared into the abyss, and the abyss had tusks. From that day forward, a chill settled into the village's bones. Conversations turned shorter. Laughter came less easily. And then, as if summoned by collective guilt, Gregory appeared. You find yourself watching the faces of the people in the circle. Some older, some young, all tired. Not from chasing a boar, but from holding in stories they never got to finish. There's something oddly beautiful in the way silence wraps around them, like a blanket or a secret. Then someone speaks. "He's not just a nuisance," they say. "He's the distraction we cling to, because if we look past him, we might have to look at each other again." It lands hard. No one argues, no one laughs, not even Elric, who once tried to catch Gregory with a fishing net and now wears it like a cape of shame. The woman with the folk song, her name is Ilska, by the way, speaks next. "We fear the wrong things. It's easier to hunt a boar than admit we've let rot set into our own walls." That night, you walk home slower than usual. The air is cool and soft, the kind that makes your breath puff like tiny clouds. You wonder if anyone else noticed the odd glint in Gregory's eyes earlier. Not menace, not madness, something closer to memory, like he's not a monster, but a mirror. And speaking of mirrors, remember the ancient Egyptians? They used polished copper to see their reflections. But they believed the image wasn't just you. It was your Ka, your spiritual double. Maybe Gregory is that for this town. Not just a reflection of bad decisions, but their very embodiment, tusks and all. You're not sure if that makes things better or worse. Back in bed, you listen to the wind again. It brushes the window like a slow, deliberate breath. You think of Ilska's song, of the silent men who came back broken, and of a village that prefers to bake around the cracks rather than repair them. And you think, maybe it's time someone finally asked the real question. Not, how do we get rid of the boar? But, why did we need him in the first place?
The next morning, the village wakes with an unusual hush. It's not that Gregory's gone. On the contrary, he's very much present, currently dragging someone's picnic bench into the creek like he's redecorating a home that only exists in his mind. But there's something different in the air. A quiet agreement passed invisibly from house to house. It's time to talk, for real this time. You make your way to the bakery because serious conversation requires serious carbohydrates. Inside, the smell is borderline hypnotic. Fresh bread, warm spices, and something mysteriously citrusy that the baker insists is lemon zest, but might just be a cry for help. Outside, a few villagers have started dragging chairs and benches into a loose semicircle. Someone even brings a chalkboard, as if emotionally unpacking collective trauma requires bullet points. You sit down next to Ilska. She gives you a nod that says, "Ready?" which is impressive, considering she's holding a donut the size of her face. The mayor, an exhausted man whose tie has been crooked since 2003, clears his throat. "So," he says, "let's talk about him." There's a long pause, and then someone in the back mutters, "The pig or the preacher?" which gets a few awkward chuckles and one actual snort, but the mood stays serious. A woman named Marit, who runs the flower stall and has a voice like honey over gravel, is the first to speak plainly. "We never went back for Tom," she says. And just like that, the air thickens. She doesn't need to explain. Everyone knows who Tom was. Big hands, loud laugh, terrible taste in hats. He was the one who didn't return. "I think," he says, "I think Gregory is what came back in his place." It's not the most logical sentence, but no one corrects her, because somehow it feels exactly true. Here's the historical fact for today. In the Middle Ages, it wasn't unusual for communities to appoint a scapegoat during times of crisis, someone or something onto which fears, guilt, and blame could be cast. They'd be symbolically exiled, sometimes even ritually burdened with the sins of the people. Real biblical stuff. Sometimes it was a person, sometimes an actual goat. In this case, well, Gregory fits the part if you squint hard enough and don't mind a few splinters.
As the circle of voices continues, a pattern begins to emerge. Everyone has a story about the boar, but more importantly, everyone has a story that ends with them almost confronting something else. An apology never spoken, a boundary never drawn, a silence that grew into a chasm. Gregory, in his unpredictable fury, gave them something external to worry about, something simpler than grief or guilt. Someone brings up the fact that years ago, the village once tried to install a proper waste management system but ended up in a shouting match over the color of the bins. Another reminds the group how they voted against building a new community center because two cousins were feuding over inherited sheep. That one's still unresolved, by the way. The sheep have formed factions. The academic debate of the day, whether these breakdowns in communication stemmed from generational pride or simply the slow corrosion of rural infrastructure. Some say the town's decline began when the post office got replaced by a vending machine that occasionally spits out batteries instead of stamps. Others argue it started when the old traditions, storytelling nights, shared planting days, were replaced by committee meetings and spreadsheets. But you think it started when people stopped asking why they were really angry. The weirdest detail shared that day comes from Lars, the butcher, who claims that Gregory only destroys objects made of pine. Won't go near oak, he insists, hates the smell. Whether that's true or just the product of a man who spent too much time around brine and cleavers, no one knows. But it's just odd enough to be believed. By midday, there's a strange energy in the group, like a pot that's finally started to simmer after years of being left cold. It's not healing, exactly, but it's heat, and that's something. As the sun begins to dip, the meeting ends not with a plan, but with a murmur of understanding. They won't drive Gregory out. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Not until they understand what it is they're actually running from. You walk home feeling like you've just finished a season finale where nothing exploded, but everything changed. And just as you reach your door, you see him, Gregory, standing still for once, watching, not charging, not chewing, not headbutting lawn ornaments into oblivion, just watching. You nod. He doesn't nod back because, again, he's a wild boar. But still, you get the feeling he understands.
You sleep better that night. Not well, exactly. There's still the occasional rustle outside that makes your heart flip like a pancake, and you're 90% sure your window creaked open on its own, but better. Maybe it's the bakery bread still sitting heavy in your stomach, or maybe it's the weird comfort that comes from communal chaos being acknowledged. Like your house may be falling apart, but at least the whole neighborhood is collapsing in style. The next morning, you wake with purpose and back pain. The back pain goes away with a stretch. The purpose doesn't. You've decided to find the old records, the ones stored in the half-burnt church archive building, stacked neatly between hymnals and ancient, questionable tax reports. You want to know when Gregory first appeared,
Not when the villagers noticed him, not when the chaos began, but the first sign. Because you have a theory, and unfortunately, it requires inhaling 70 years of dust. The archive building is exactly what you'd expect. Cold, silent, and so musty it could be bottled and sold as O-Day forgotten responsibility. You step inside with a flashlight that flickers dramatically, as if it graduated from a haunted house. Each step kicks up a memory. Each drawer creaks like it's auditioning for a horror film. You finally find it, a logbook, buried under a bundle of festival flyers and a recipe for something called sour beet surprise that really should have stayed buried. The logbook is handwritten in faded ink, the kind that whispers rather than speaks. You skim past births, deaths, crop tallies, and then there it is. Wine boar, unusual in behavior and size, observed circling the old well. No threat perceived at the time. The entry is dated 47 years ago. Now, for your historical trivia of the day. In ancient Mesopotamia, wells were often believed to be portals, not just to the underworld, but to the hidden layers of consciousness. In rural folklore across Europe, many believed that animals who lingered near such places could be touched by something otherworldly. Not necessarily cursed, but altered. You glance up at the roof beams. Some of them are scorched, remnants of the fire that gutted the church years ago. Local gossip says it started from a lightning strike, but your memory says otherwise. You remember whispers about the day the statue of Saint Veller, the town's patron protector, fell over on its own. A week later, the fire. Was Gregory there? Historians still debate whether regional folklore, like the Saint Veller stories, actually evolved because of inexplicable local events, or if the stories came first and shaped how the townsfolk interpreted those events. Which came first, the myth or the mess? Back outside, you bring the logbook to Ilska. She meets you on the edge of the village square, standing beneath the crooked statue of an old horse that has seen better centuries. You show her the entry. She doesn't laugh, doesn't question it. She just exhales like someone who's been waiting years for something to make sense, and knows this almost does. Then she says something that stops your breath like a cold bucket of river water. He was already here before I was born, before most of us, but no one wanted to remember. That's when it clicks. Gregory isn't just a weird animal. He's a marker, a symptom of something older. Like when your laptop fan starts wheezing, it's not the fan's fault, it's just what you notice first. Ilska tells you that long ago, the village had a tradition. Once every decade, a reckoning walk. The elders would take the entire town out to the forest's edge, light a single lantern, and walk in silence until dawn. No talking, no maps, just walking. The belief was, if something was festering, guilt, secrets, old anger, it would rise to the surface before sunrise, and they'd leave it in the woods. But the last reckoning walk was canceled, the year Tom disappeared. You don't say anything. You don't need to. Instead, you both look toward the forest where the trees stand like frozen giants, and you both know that's where you're going next. But not yet. First, there's prep. Here comes your weird curiosity for this section. It turns out the town's old lanterns, crafted from beechwood and brass, were coated in a resin made from fermented gooseberries and crushed snail shells. Supposedly to make them last longer. More likely, it just made them smell like sour defeat. That night, you dream of footsteps, hundreds of them, crunching on leaves that sound like whispers. You dream of Tom's hat, hanging from a branch like an unanswered question. And you dream of Gregory, watching you from beneath a tree, eyes reflecting firelight, not angry, not even wild, just waiting. When you wake, there's mud on your windowsill and a pine cone on your pillow. No one else in the village got one.
You follow Ilska to the edge of the forest, just as dawn begins to bleed orange through the branches, soft like a secret you almost don't want to hear. The forest here is a cathedral of ancient trees, their trunks wrapped in moss that feels like old velvet under your fingertips. You step carefully, crunching twigs and leaves beneath your boots, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and forgotten stories. The reckoning walk begins with no words, just the slow, steady rhythm of footsteps in the quiet. The lantern she carries glows faintly, casting long shadows that flicker like ghosts dancing in the morning mist. You remember that the reckoning walk was meant to confront the unseen, whatever grudge or grief the village held in its bones. They believed the forest could carry away the weight if only they faced it in silence. Historians still debate if these walks were spiritual rituals or social tools designed to unite the community in times of hardship. Either way, the ritual had stopped decades ago, and now you can feel the weight of that absence hanging heavy around you. As you move deeper into the woods, you notice strange markings carved into the bark of some trees, symbols that seem to pulse with an old kind of power. Curiously, these aren't random. They resemble the runes used by ancient forest dwellers, thought to protect against wild beasts. You wonder if they were left to guard against more than just animals. You can't help but think of Gregory lurking somewhere beyond the tree line, a silent sentinel in this living labyrinth. Suddenly, Ilska stops, her breath catching as a soft grunt echoes nearby. You freeze, heart thumping in your ears, scanning the dim forest. A rustle in the underbrush reveals a wild boar, massive with bristled fur and eyes that gleam with uncanny intelligence. Not Gregory, but enough to remind you why this forest demands respect. You imagine what it must have been like to hunt such a creature centuries ago, armed with nothing but a spear and a prayer. You probably wouldn't survive 5 minutes out here, let alone track a boar as clever as this one. You push onward until the group reaches the old well, the very one Gregory was first seen circling. The well's stone rim is cracked and worn, covered in creeping ivy. The silence here feels almost reverent. You glance down into the dark water, catching your reflection distorted by ripples. It's easy to imagine how legends were born here, how the well could be a portal or a trap, depending on who's telling the story. You think about the curious fact that wells in many cultures were often seen as gateways to other worlds or the underworld itself. Some say that spirits linger near such places, waiting for the living to cross over. You shiver, not from cold, but from the weight of those old beliefs. The village's history isn't just written in books, it's etched into every stone and whispered in every shadow. As the group starts to circle back, you feel a sudden breeze, carrying a faint earthy scent mixed with something almost sweet, like fermented gooseberries. You look at Ilska, who shrugs with a knowing smile. Old magic, or just the forest reminding us it's alive, she says.
You're not sure which, but you're beginning to think the line between myth and reality is thinner here than anywhere else you've been. You end the walk with a soft laugh, partly nervous, partly amused, thinking how absurd it is that a group of villagers once believed a boar could hold the secrets to their peace. But then again, maybe it's not so absurd. Sometimes the quietest creatures carry the loudest stories. You and the others returned from the forest under a sky slowly turning pale blue, the crisp morning air filling your lungs with a fresh, hopeful chill. The village wakes gently, the distant clatter of pots and the low hum of voices mingling with birdsong. As you walk through the familiar dirt paths, you can't help but feel the weight of what just happened lingering like a soft fog in your mind. The Reckoning Walk wasn't just a ritual, it was a moment where history and present converged, where every footstep echoed the lives of those who walked before you, facing fears, uncertainties, and mysteries much like your own. You catch a glimpse of the old butcher shop, its faded sign swinging lazily in the breeze. The smell of cured meats wafts faintly, a reminder of simpler times. Here, the villagers once debated endlessly about the boar that no one would hunt. You imagine the conversations spilling over the cracked wooden tables, old men arguing, women rolling their eyes, children daring each other to sneak into the forest at dusk. It's funny how such a stubborn creature could become the center of a village's social life, almost like a furry celebrity whose reputation grew taller with every retelling. Historians still discuss whether these community debates were more about the animal itself or the bonds that formed during those long, cold evenings. Maybe it wasn't the boar's elusiveness alone, but what it represented, the challenge, the mystery, the shared hope of conquering the unknown. You think of how today people gather over screens and coffee cups, but centuries ago, stories were the internet, and legends were the tweets that shaped a community's identity. As you wander closer to the village square, you notice a small group setting up wooden stalls for the weekly market. The air is filled with the scent of fresh bread and herbs. It reminds you of an odd curiosity. In medieval times, some townsfolk believed that baking bread during a full moon could improve its flavor. You chuckle, imagining a baker consulting the moon's phases before kneading dough. Probably as effective as modern-day mood playlists, but with more flour. You sit on a nearby bench, letting your thoughts drift while sipping a cool herbal tea from a clay cup. The warmth seeps slowly through your fingers, calming your restless mind. You watch as children chase each other around the fountain, their laughter light and free, a stark contrast to the heavy weight of the forest walk. It's in these moments you realize how stories, no matter how slow or boring, carry a magic of their own, a gentle power that weaves generations together, comforting and grounding like a soft blanket on a chilly night. Before you rise, you pull out your phone, tapping a quick message inviting viewers to share where they're watching from and what time it is. Because this story, like all the best ones, is meant to be shared. You smile, remembering the call to action tucked in the script. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. The digital age may have changed how stories travel, but the heart of storytelling remains the same. The next evening, you find yourself drawn back to the village's small tavern, where the warm glow of candlelight spills onto rough-hewn tables, inviting weary travelers and locals alike. The smell of spiced cider and roasted chestnuts fills the air, a soothing mix that immediately calms your senses. As you settle into a creaky wooden chair, you overhear snippets of an old argument resurrected. The age-old debate over why no one ever dared to hunt the stubborn boar that roamed the nearby woods. The villagers speak with a mix of amusement and reverence, as if the creature is both a nuisance and a protector, a paradox you're eager to unravel. You lean in as a grizzled elder shares a curious fact. In some medieval villages, boars were seen as symbols of stubborn resistance and even bravery, embodying qualities both feared and admired. This might explain why the villagers hesitated. Hunting the boar was more than just about survival. It was about confronting a living legend. You imagine how, centuries ago, such animals were woven into folklore, often blurring the lines between beast and myth. Historians still debate whether these stories were deliberately cultivated to preserve community identity or simply born from a collective need to explain the unknown. The tavern's low murmur blends with the crackle of the hearth, and you notice a peculiar painting hanging crookedly on the wall. An almost comical depiction of a boar wearing a crown, its eyes gleaming with mischief. You chuckle softly, realizing this might have been the village's way of lightening the tale, turning a potentially fearsome creature into a gentle monarch of the forest. You think how humor has always been a subtle way humans handle their fears, a quiet rebellion against the serious and the scary. You take a sip of your cider, its warmth spreading slowly through your chest, and glance around. The room is filled with people who have their own versions of the story, each adding a layer to the legend. It strikes you that this communal storytelling is as important as the story itself, like a living tapestry constantly being woven. You probably wouldn't survive an evening without such stories, and honestly, you'd miss the charm of it all. As the night deepens, you imagine how the boar's tale will continue to be told, softly and slowly, lulling future generations to sleep with its mix of mystery and comfort. And you feel a strange sense of peace, knowing that sometimes the slowest stories carry the most lasting warmth. You wake up the next morning with a gentle resolve to visit the village's old archives, a dusty room filled with scrolls and leather-bound books that hold centuries of forgotten tales. As you push open the creaking door, a faint, musty scent wraps around you like a forgotten blanket, thick with history and silence. The flickering light of a single candle casts long shadows on the stone walls, inviting you deeper into this treasure trove of stories. Here, you hope to uncover some hidden clues about the boar that no one wanted to hunt, beyond the whispered village gossip and legends. You carefully unroll a fragile parchment, its edges curled and fragile, revealing the hand-drawn maps of forest trails and hunting grounds. One particularly worn page shows an illustration of a massive boar surrounded by strange symbols that seem almost ritualistic. You pause, noticing the intricate details, each line telling a silent story of respect and caution. You realize this wasn't just a beast to be feared, but a creature wrapped in layers of cultural meaning and superstition. Interestingly, historians still debate whether these symbols were meant to protect the village or to warn outsiders away. A curious note scribbled in the margin catches your eye. a recipe for a peculiar boar repellent made from a mix of herbs and fermented berries. You smile at the idea of villagers concocting such a potion, almost like a medieval bug spray, hoping to keep their stubborn guest at bay without a fight. It's a charming reminder that sometimes the gentlest solutions are preferred over the loudest battles. You lean back, running your fingers over the rough wood of the table, feeling a quiet connection to the generations who lived and breathed these stories. The slow unfolding of these pages feels like a lullaby for your restless mind, a gentle reminder that history isn't just about grand battles or famous kings, but also about small moments and quiet mysteries. Maybe that's why these tales work so well as bedtime stories, soft whispers from the past to soothe and calm. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, what time it is, and maybe what kind of tea or drink you have beside you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together.
You find yourself wandering along the forest's edge at dusk, where the fading sunlight paints the leaves with a soft golden glow. The air is crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine and damp earth, grounding you in the present moment. Here, in this quiet boundary between village and wilderness, the story of the boar deepens. You recall an old folk tale whispered by the villagers, how the boar was said to be a guardian spirit, protecting the forest from those who sought to exploit it recklessly. It's a comforting image, like a soft blanket shielding the wild from harm. You imagine the boar's heavy footsteps muffled by moss and fallen leaves, its dark eyes reflecting the last light of day. It's interesting to note that in many ancient cultures, animals like the boar were often revered rather than hunted, a stark contrast to the modern view of nature as a resource to be conquered. This shift in perception sparks a gentle debate among scholars about how changing human values influence which stories get told and which creatures become heroes or villains. You might not realize it, but this slow evolution in storytelling mirrors how we too grow and change with time. As you stroll, you come across a peculiar patch of mushrooms, arranged almost deliberately in a circle. You chuckle to yourself, thinking about the fairy rings of folklore and the mystery they evoke, nature's subtle magic hidden in plain sight. It's a whimsical reminder that even in the most ordinary places, wonder quietly waits to be discovered. You probably wouldn't have noticed these little marvels if you were rushing through life, but here, in this slow-paced narrative, they stand out like stars in a calm night sky. The forest hums softly around you, a natural lullaby that gently rocks your thoughts. You feel the weight of the boar's legend settle warmly in your mind, like a well-worn book tucked beside your pillow. And just like that, the night draws you deeper into a story where history and myth intertwine, inviting you to rest and dream. The following day, you find yourself sitting by a gentle stream that winds lazily through the forest, its water sparkling under the afternoon sun like scattered diamonds. The soft murmur of the current blends with the distant songs of birds, creating a soothing soundtrack that feels almost designed for moments like this. Here, you reflect on the villagers' uneasy relationship with the boar, how it was never just about hunting or survival, but about balance, respect, and understanding nature's rhythms. You imagine the quiet negotiations between humans and the wild, like a delicate dance choreographed over centuries. You come across an old journal page tucked into a mossy nook, its ink faded but still legible. It describes how villagers once left offerings of food and herbs near the forest's edge, a silent pact meant to keep the boar and other creatures content. This practice reminds you of similar rituals across different cultures, where coexistence is prioritized over domination. Historians still debate whether these rituals were genuine acts of reverence or clever strategies to avoid conflict. But either way, they speak to a deep-seated human desire for harmony. As you sit back, letting the cool breeze brush your skin, you notice a curious detail: a tiny snail slowly making its way across a nearby rock, its shell glistening like polished amber. You smile at the snail's unhurried journey, a perfect metaphor for the slow, patient unfolding of this story. There's a quiet humor in imagining a creature so small, playing its part in a legend that spans centuries. Proof that every character, no matter how modest, has a role to play. The gentle rhythm of the stream and the warmth of the sun create a perfect lull, coaxing your thoughts to slow and soften. You realize that this is what makes these tales so comforting, their invitation to pause, breathe, and simply be. And as the day fades, you feel a calm readiness to drift deeper into the forest's embrace and the boar's enduring mystery. As twilight settles in, you find yourself by the village hearth, where the flickering flames cast playful shadows on the stone walls. The warmth wraps around you like an old friend, and the faint scent of burning wood mingles with the cozy comfort of worn fabrics and well-loved furniture. Here, the boar's story takes on a new dimension, one of communal memory and shared experience. You imagine villagers gathered in this very spot, trading stories and laughter, their voices weaving the boar into the fabric of their lives. The subtle humor in their tales reminds you that even serious legends can have a lighthearted side. One particularly amusing anecdote survives about a hunter who mistook a large pumpkin for the elusive boar, much to the amusement of everyone when the mistake was discovered. You can almost hear the collective chuckle echoing through the room, a gentle reminder that not every attempt at bravery ends in triumph. It's these little moments of levity that make history feel alive and relatable, like a slow conversation with an old friend. Interestingly, scholars still debate whether the boar's legend was primarily a cautionary tale or a celebration of nature's resilience. The truth might lie somewhere in between, wrapped in layers of oral tradition and shifting cultural values. You feel a quiet appreciation for this ambiguity, which invites you to interpret the story in your own way, without pressure or judgment. The crackling fire softens your thoughts, urging you to relax and let the evening unfold naturally. You realize how these shared narratives, passed down through generations, create a comforting continuity, a steady thread that connects past and present, waking and dreaming. So, before you settle in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're feeling chatty, tell me where you're watching from and what your favorite bedtime story is. You wander outside again,
now under a sky brushed with stars that twinkle softly like distant lanterns. The cool night air carries the faint scent of pine and earth, grounding you in this quiet moment between day and dream. As you stroll along a narrow path winding through the woods, your thoughts drift back to the boar and the many ways it shaped not only the forest, but the hearts of those who lived nearby. It strikes you how the story is less about the creature itself and more about the delicate balance between fear, respect, and curiosity that humans have always felt toward the wild. There's an old academic debate you overhear in your mind, historians discussing whether the boar's elusive nature was a symbol of freedom or a metaphor for the untamed parts of human nature we prefer to keep hidden. You find yourself smiling at this, imagining a group of serious scholars passionately arguing over something as intangible as a wild pig's meaning. It's a reminder that stories, no matter how slow or gentle, often carry layers of mystery waiting to be uncovered. Nearby, a family of owls hoots softly in the darkness, their calls echoing like a lullaby sung by the forest itself. You catch sight of a small hedgehog scurrying through the underbrush, its spines glistening under the moonlight like tiny armor plates. It's a whimsical scene that brings a lightness to your steps and a warmth to your chest, proof that even in the quietest moments, life brims with subtle wonders. The path bends gently, guiding you deeper into the woods and the heart of this timeless tale. With each step, you feel more connected to the land, to the story, and to the peaceful rhythm of the night. The boar's legend, with all its quirks and mysteries, becomes a soft anchor, helping you drift toward rest and gentle dreams. You find yourself at the edge of the forest, where the trees give way to an open meadow bathed in moonlight, silver and serene. The air is cool and carries a faint sweetness from wildflowers that sway gently in the night breeze. Here, the story's final moments unfold softly, like a whispered secret shared just between you and the night. You reflect on how the boar, once a creature of tension and uncertainty, has become a symbol of patience and understanding, an emblem of the quiet power found in acceptance rather than conquest. You think about the villagers one last time, their cautious respect, their humorous mistakes, and the way they navigated a complicated relationship with nature without losing their sense of community or wonder. Historians still debate if such stories were primarily teaching tools or simply ways to make the long nights more bearable. But either way, they remain a soothing presence that connects generations. Nearby, a gentle cricket song begins, its rhythmic chirping like a natural metronome, guiding you toward calmness. The soft rustle of grass and the occasional hoot of an owl add layers to this peaceful symphony. You picture the boar resting somewhere in the shadows, unbothered and free, much like you, ready now to let go and slip into dreams. So, before you settle in fully, remember the slow humor, the soft sounds, and the timeless tale that brought you here. Take a deep breath, feel the safety of this moment, and allow the peaceful night to carry you gently onward.
Imagine the gentle sway of trees outside, their leaves whispering lullabies in a language only the night understands. The faint glow of stars twinkles above, steady and comforting, like tiny beacons of peace watching over you. Each sound, each shadow, each memory from tonight's journey blends into a soothing mosaic that invites your mind to quiet down and your heart to soften. In this moment, there is only calm, an endless horizon of tranquility spreading quietly before you. So breathe in deeply once more, and as you exhale, feel yourself drifting with ease, carried gently into the soft embrace of sleep. End of script. Sweet dreams.
you.